As I stepped into the lively venue, my eyes quickly scanned the room for familiar faces. That's when I spotted him, a tall, handsome man with warm brown eyes and a charming smile that could light up the whole room. It was James! Feeling a rush of excitement and nerves, I decided to make my move and introduced myself. "Hi, I'm Catherine. Your mom is a good friend of my friend Sarah," I said with a friendly smile. James returned the smile, extending his hand towards me. "Nice to meet you, Catherine. I've heard a lot about you." "I'm James," he replied, his voice as smooth as silk. We spent the rest of the evening talking, laughing, and discovering that we had so much in common. Our interests aligned and our personalities seemed to complement each other perfectly. It was as if we had known each other for ages. As the night progressed, we found ourselves stealing glances at each other, and the connection between us grew stronger with every passing moment. It was undeniable. There was something special blossoming between us. Later that evening, when the party was winding down, James mustered up the courage to ask me out on a date. "Catherine, would you like to go out for coffee with me sometime? I'd love to get to know you better," he said, his eyes filled with genuine interest. A wave of happiness washed over me, and I nodded eagerly. "I'd love that, James." "Coffee sounds great," I replied, trying to hide the excitement in my voice. We exchanged phone numbers, and from that moment on, our lives became intertwined. We went on that coffee date and many more after that, exploring the city, trying out new restaurants, and enjoying each other's company. Every date felt like a new adventure, and with each passing day, I fell deeper in love with James. He was everything I had ever hoped for in a partner, caring, compassionate, and with a great sense of humor. He made me feel special and cherished, and I knew I had found someone truly remarkable. And so, our love story began, and as the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, we knew we were destined to be together. Eventually, James got down on one knee and asked me the question that would change our lives forever. "Catherine, will you marry me?" he said, holding a sparkling diamond ring in his hand. Tears of joy streamed down my face, and I nodded fervently. "Yes! James! 1,000 times! Yes!" Our beautiful wedding day arrived, and I walked down the aisle, my heart pounding with excitement. As I stood before James, surrounded by our loved ones, I knew that this was the start of a lifelong journey, filled with love, laughter, and happiness. James and I wanted our wedding to reflect our love for nature and the outdoors. We chose a picturesque garden as the venue, surrounded by vibrant flowers and lush greenery. The sun was shining brightly, casting a warm glow over everything, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of blossoms through the air. As I walked down the aisle, arm in arm with my proud father, I couldn't help but feel overwhelmed with joy and emotion. All eyes were on us, but in that moment, it felt like James and I were the only ones in the world. His eyes locked onto mine, and his smile was radiant, assuring me that everything was perfect. Our closest friends and family gathered to witness our union. The atmosphere was filled with love and happiness, and there wasn't a dry eye in the audience as we exchanged heartfelt vows. The words we spoke were not just promises, but a true reflection of our commitment to one another. During the ceremony, my best friend Sarah, who was also the maid of honor, couldn't contain her excitement. "Catherine, you look absolutely stunning. James is one lucky man," she whispered to me with a wink, earning a chuckle from both of us. As the ceremony concluded, we sealed our love with a tender kiss, and the applause and cheers from our loved ones filled the air. It was official. We were now husband and wife. The reception was equally magical. A grand marquee stood amidst the garden, adorned with fairy lights and elegant decorations. Soft music played in the background, creating a romantic ambiance that swept everyone off their feet. During the speeches, James' best man, Mike, took the stage. I've known James for years, and I've never seen him happier than when he met Catherine. "You two are a perfect match, and I couldn't be happier for you," he said, raising his glass in a toast. After the heartfelt speeches, it was time for the first dance. James and I swayed together on the dance floor, lost in each other's eyes. It felt like time had stood still, and all that mattered was the love we shared. As we danced, I whispered in his ear, "Thank you for making this day so magical, James. I love you." He smiled and replied, You're the one who made it magical, Catherine. I love you more than words can express." The rest of the night was a whirlwind of laughter, dancing, and celebration. Our friends and family joined us on the dance floor, and the joyous atmosphere filled the garden until the late hours. As the day came to an end, James and I stole a moment alone under the starry night sky. "This day couldn't have been more perfect," I said, resting my head on his shoulder. "It was perfect because you were with me," he replied, brushing a gentle kiss on my forehead. And so, our dream wedding marked the beginning of our new life together as husband and wife. Our love story had reached a new chapter, one filled with happiness and cherished memories. After our dream wedding, James and I decided to buy our first apartment together. It was a cozy little place, perfect for starting our life as a married couple. But there was a twist. James suggested that we live with his parents for a while. At first, I was taken aback by the idea, unsure about how it would be to live with my new in-laws. However, James assured me that it would be a great opportunity for us to bond with his family and save up some money. And so we packed our bags and moved in with his parents. James' father, Mr. Anderson, was a warm and welcoming man who made me feel like part of the family from day one. He was supportive of our marriage and treated me with utmost kindness and respect. We quickly developed a strong bond, and I couldn't have asked for a better father-in-law. One day, as I was helping Mr. Anderson in the kitchen, he looked at me with a smile and said, "Catherine, I've seen how happy James is with you. I'm glad he found someone as wonderful as you." His words touched my heart, and I replied, "Thank you so much for your kind words, Mr. Anderson. I feel blessed to be a part of your family." However, not everything was sunshine and rainbows. James' mother, Mrs. Anderson, didn't seem to share her husband's enthusiasm about my presence. From the beginning, she treated me with coldness and skepticism, and I could sense her disapproval. Mrs. Anderson often found fault with the way I did household chores, claiming that I didn't do things the way she liked. She would point out every little mistake and demand that I do more than anyone else in the house. It was exhausting, but I tried my best to maintain my composure for the sake of my marriage. One evening, while I was washing dishes in the kitchen, Mrs. Anderson walked in and criticized the way I was organizing the dishes. "Catherine, you're doing it all wrong. Let me show you how it's done," she said with an air of superiority. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. "I appreciate your help, Mrs. Anderson, but I've got this. Please, let me finish." "Please, let me finish," I replied, trying to assert myself politely. As time went on, Mrs. Anderson's behavior became more demanding, and she often left all the household responsibilities to me, even when she was perfectly capable of helping out. It was tough, but I didn't want to create any tension in the family. Through it all, I found solace in the support of James and his father. They noticed the unfair treatment and always stood by my side, offering words of encouragement and love. Their unwavering support gave me the strength to face each day with a smile, despite the challenges. Living with the in-laws proved to be a mixed bag of emotions. While I cherished the close bond with my father-in-law, dealing with the constant scrutiny from my mother-in-law was no easy feat. But little did I know that our journey had more surprises in store. As the days turned into weeks, Mrs. Anderson's behavior towards me grew more unpleasant. It seemed like no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't please her. She constantly found fault in everything I did, from the way I cooked to how I folded the laundry. One afternoon, as I was setting the dining table, Mrs. Anderson walked in, her disapproving gaze fixed on me. "Catherine, you can't even set the table properly." "It's a simple task, really," she said with a snide remark. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. "I'm sorry if it's not up to your standards, Mrs. Anderson." "I'll fix it right away," I replied, my voice steady. Despite my efforts to please her, it felt like nothing I did would ever be good enough. I felt like an outsider in my own home, constantly on edge, trying to avoid her criticism. One day, James came home early from work and found me visibly upset. He gently pulled me into a hug and asked, "What's wrong, Catherine? You seem really stressed." Tears welled up in my eyes as I finally let my guard down. "Your mother, James. I just can't seem to do anything right in her eyes." It's exhausting, and I don't know how much longer I can handle it. I confessed. James held me tighter, his eyes filled with empathy. I'm so sorry, Catherine. I know my mother can be difficult, but please know that I love you, and I appreciate everything you do for our family. His words provided some comfort, but the constant tension at home was taking a toll on my emotional well-being. However, amid the challenges, my bond with my father-in-law, Mr. Anderson, grew stronger. He became my pillar of support, and we often spent time together sharing stories and laughter. One evening, while Mr. Anderson and I were in the garden, he looked at me with a compassionate smile. Catherine, I see how hard you're trying, and I admire your strength. Don't let my wife's behavior bring you down. You are a wonderful person, and you deserve all the happiness in the world, he said, his kind words lifting my spirits. With Mr. Anderson's encouragement, I decided to face the situation head-on. I mustered the courage to have a heart-to-heart conversation with Mrs. Anderson. Mrs. Anderson, I respect you as my mother-in-law, and I want us to have a good relationship. Can we talk about what's bothering you? I asked, hoping for an opening to bridge the gap between us. She seemed taken aback by my direct approach, but finally opened up about feeling protective of her son and finding it hard to let go. We spent hours talking, and though she didn't entirely change, there was a hint of understanding that glimmered between us. With time, things started to shift. Mrs. Anderson's criticisms didn't hurt me as much, and I focused on the love and support I received from James and his father. Little by little, Mrs. Anderson's attitude softened, and she began to see me in a different light. It wasn't a perfect transformation, but it was progress, and that gave me hope. And so, I learned that love and patience can conquer even the toughest of situations. The experience taught me resilience and the value of standing up for myself while also finding compassion for others. As the days turned into months, Mrs. Anderson's behavior remained unpredictable. Some days, she would be relatively pleasant, while on others, her criticisms and demands would be relentless. I tried my best to maintain my composure, but the constant pressure was starting to take a toll on me. One day, Mrs. Anderson complained of a bad back, claiming she couldn't perform any household chores. She laid in bed, giving orders and leaving all the responsibilities on my shoulders. Cooking, cleaning, taking care of her. It all fell on me while she did nothing but rest. James was at work, and his father, Mr. Anderson, had some errands to run, leaving me alone with Mrs. Anderson. I felt overwhelmed but knew I had to keep going for the sake of our family. As I rushed around the house, trying to manage everything, Mrs. Anderson called out from her room, "Catherine, make sure you don't mess up the dinner. It's your responsibility, you know." I took a deep breath, trying to push past the frustration building inside me. "I'll do my best, Mrs. Anderson," I replied, trying to remain calm. As the day went on, the workload seemed endless, and I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of resentment. I missed the time when my home was a sanctuary, a place of comfort and love. Now it felt like a battleground. The breaking point came during a family gathering for Mr. Anderson's birthday. The entire family was busy preparing for the celebration, but Mrs. Anderson was nowhere to be found. She complained of back pain and refused to participate in any preparations. I found myself single-handedly preparing the food and setting the table for the celebration. Despite my exhaustion, I was determined to make it a special day for Mr. Anderson, who deserved all the love and attention. During the party, Mrs. Anderson made a grand entrance, trying to appear helpless and garner sympathy from the guests. As I served the food, she loudly commented, "Oh, Catherine, I hope the food is edible this time. You're not exactly known for your cooking skills." My face flushed with embarrassment, and I felt everyone's eyes on me. I wanted to defend myself, but I knew it would only escalate the situation. Instead, I smiled politely and said nothing. After the guests left, I retreated to our room, feeling defeated and humiliated. I could no longer hold back the tears, and they streamed down my face as I sat alone in the dimly lit room. Moments later, James entered the room, concern etched across his face. "Catherine, what's wrong? Why are you crying?" he asked, sitting down beside me. I struggled to find the right words, but eventually I managed to say, "I can't take it anymore, James. Your mother's constant criticism and humiliation. I feel like I'm drowning." He wrapped his arms around me, pulling me close. "I'm so sorry, Catherine. You don't deserve to be treated this way. We'll find a solution. I promise," he whispered, kissing my forehead. After the party ended and the guests left, Mr. Anderson called for a family meeting. He couldn't bear to see his wife treat me so unfairly. "Enough is enough. I won't let your mother continue to mistreat Catherine while she does nothing. It's time for a change," he declared firmly. Mrs. Anderson tried to defend herself, tears streaming down her face, but James stood by his father's side, supporting me and defending my honor. "Dad's right, Mom. You can't treat Catherine like this. She's my wife, and I won't let anyone disrespect her," he said with conviction. In that moment, I realized the strength of our family bonds and the power of standing up for what's right. It was a pivotal moment that shook the family dynamics and demanded a resolution. Mrs. Anderson, realizing the severity of her actions, apologized tearfully and promised to change. It was a step towards healing, but the scars of public humiliation ran deep. The party that was meant to be a celebration turned into a lesson for us all. It brought to light the importance of respect, empathy, and open communication within a family. "After the way you treated Catherine, you can't be considered a member of our family. Get out." Mr. Anderson's face contorted in anger. He pointed his finger at the door. His wife begged for mercy, but he was adamant. After a couple hours, she packed her things and left the house. After that, the atmosphere in the house was no longer tense. I no longer felt the toxic attitude and lived happily ever after. And so, justice was served not through revenge or retaliation, but through love, understanding, and compassion. Our journey as a family had been filled with challenges, but it also brought us moments of growth and redemption. As I reflect on our story, I'm reminded of the power of forgiveness and the strength of family bonds. Love can triumph over adversity, and when we choose to support and uplift each other, there's no obstacle we can't overcome.